Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm sitting here in, I was about to say sunny, but kind of nice-ish weather here in England currently. Just got back from Naples. But I'm talking to the rather wonderful Mr. Victor Santura. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and basically I just came back from wonderful London.
Oh, that was it. You were in London when we were in Naples.
Exactly. I was in London last weekend having a show with Triptychon, but so we missed each other because you were not there. And now I'm back in at home in the Bavarian countryside where the weather is not as pretty as it is in London.
So you've done a rather wonderful course with our good friend, Mr. Christian Kohler. Tell us a little bit about it.
Main man of the band is our singer and other guitar player, Tom Gabriel Fischer, a legend in metal, even though he doesn't like to hear that. So he had the band Celtic Frost back in the 80s. In the end of Celtic Frost, in the last year of their existence, I was already their live guitarist. And then, unfortunately, the band broke up. And Tom then founded Triptychon, and I was a member of Triptychon from the beginning. I'm the guitarist, and I also always had the engineering duties. And Tom and me always co-produced the albums.
I think for us on the production side, and I totally get the artist-friendly approach of singer and songwriters and stuff like that, but you're a guitar player, engineering, co-producing, and mixing the material?
Yes. And also with the last album, I also did the mastering, yeah.
That's a pretty huge role. So tell us a little bit about the recording process. Are you going into studios to cut stuff, or are you doing it basically at your own studio and other members' studios? Drums, for instance, how are they done?
The drums, that was an interesting thing because we actually recorded the drums in the rehearsal room. That was a very deliberate decision because whenever we were rehearsing, I really loved the sound in the room. And I always thought, like, this has something really special. The ceiling was quite not very tall, like only 2 meters high or something, but nevertheless there was this kind of badassness about the room acoustics. It sounded like really aggressive and dirty in that room. And very often when we rehearsed, I loved the sound, and then we had a show and when we're on a stage, and I was always a bit like disappointed about the sound because it sounded so heavy in the room. And that's why we thought, like, let's try to get that on tape, or let's try to get that on the computer, because it was a special sound. And so that's why we made the decision to just bring our recording equipment into the rehearsal room and record the drums there.
What's interesting, of course, because classic rock rooms have super high ceilings.
Exactly, yeah.
That's the sound of a snare going. It's Metallica. It's so many great records. What were the surfaces? What were the walls and the ceilings made of?
I think the ceiling was like, there was some damping material. I don't exactly remember what it was. Some foam was on the ceiling mostly, but the walls were mostly empty, or like just a lot of posters on the walls. So that's why there were still a lot of reflections. And
okay, good.
So it was not a dry room at all. But honestly, I also have to admit, in hindsight, I would not record in that room again, because back then, it's the recordings were done in 2013, so that's like 11 and a half years ago or something like that.
Wait there. Hold on a second. So it took you 11 and a half years to make this record?
No, it's just that our last official record is like really damn old. So it came out in 2014, and ever since we haven't released a new official record. We did a very interesting and ambitious live recording since then, but we are just working on the new album, and I hope that we might finish it this year and release it next year. But the album that mixing course was about was a recording session from 2013. I learned a lot since then. Like back then, it was one of my first experiences actually with like miking up a drum room, because before that I was mostly recording drums in my small recording booth, which was like a 2 by 2 meters booth, basically. So there was not much point in working with room mics. I learned my way there, and nowadays I would also say, no, I really want to record in rooms with high ceilings, because there are some problems coming with low ceilings. Of course, that's why it's also not a very established thing, I think. But maybe that also makes the mixing course interesting, because it's not perfect recordings. There were some issues with the recordings, and we also addressed them in the mixing course. And I think people that are students and are trying to learn about mixing, when they do their own recordings, they usually don't get perfect recordings. And very often in these kind of recording courses, you have these fantastic recordings, but most people can't go to NRG studios in LA to record the drums. They maybe have to deal with like, let's say not so ideal recordings. And I think maybe that made the course also interesting, that it was not the technically seen the very best signals, but we still made it work. And I think we made a good original mix with it.
I think this is the guitar that I used to record the rhythm tracks for Tree of Suffocating Souls. At least that's the guitar that I usually always play. It's also the guitar that I use live. I know for the recording sessions for the last album, for some parts we also used a guitar that was custom built from Ibanez for Tom, which was also a black Iceman but with a Floyd Rose tremolo. So I might have actually used that other one on the recordings for the rhythm guitars, but I'm not entirely sure, and those guitars sound extremely similar because it's basically based on the same material. Very important is to have the AH1 and AH2 pickups. It's like, I think AH stands for Alan Holdsworth, if I'm not mistaken. And they have like a very particular sound, and other pickups, yeah, I mean, every pickup has a different tone, and this is kind of important for our sound. When you check the multi-tracks, you will probably realize when you listen to the DI tracks that they sound a bit unusual. So here's a little secret. When we track rhythm guitars, or when we play rhythm guitars live, we always have the tone pot closed. That is quite unusual, I think, but it's part of our sound, and well, that's just how it is, and that's probably also an explanation for you guys if you wonder why the DIs sound how they sound. Okay, now that I just showed you the guitars that I've been using for recording the tracks for Tree of Suffocating Souls, a few other things that we used in the studio. I mean, first of all, I went into a DI box just so that we have the DI signal. We never really intended to reamp anything, but for me, it's always like a safety net. So if I need to reamp something for whatever reason, then I can do it. I also find the DI tracks always super helpful as like a graphic feedback. So it's much easier to edit things if you have to do that. And yeah, it's the Palmer PDI 02 box, nothing special, a good DI box. The other two things that are essential for our sound is, first of all, an Ibanez Tube Screamer. We either use the TS10 or the TS9, and we are not just using the Tube Screamer as most people, just to like tighten up the low end and have a little bit of drive. We also used it as a real distortion pedal and as a booster. So pretty much we have the drive and the level almost all the way up. It's not exactly the settings that we are using, but it's very close to that. It's because our main amp is a JCM 800 from Marshall, the model 2203, the 100-watt version, and we always use that amp for Triptychon. It's part of our signature sound, and I think Tom has been playing JCM 800 since the 80s, and it's his favorite amp, so we always use that. I love the PV 6505, for example, but it just wouldn't sound like Triptychon. It's very important for us that we have our very unique identifiable sound and don't sound like anybody else, and so this is part of our secret sauce. And as you can see, for example, I have the preamp gain cranked up all the way and still is not enough. It's not really a high gain amp. You get a crunch sound, and it's really the combination of the Tube Screamer and that amp that provides enough gain, so you really have a heavy, distorted, high gain sound. So that's a very essential pedal for us. Funny thing is, there is now a company from the United States called Jessup Amp. They are gonna build a custom Triptychon pedal that is emulating the Tube Screamer really, really well. Very, very close to our original sound, and I think it looks pretty cool. If you switch it on, you see also you get this nice background light. Looks probably really, really cool on a stage. So for those who are interested in getting our sound, I can recommend that pedal. We also used an octaver on that one part, if you remember the song, and we just used the Boss Super Octave OC3 for that. I'm not sure if we had it before the Tube Screamer or after the Tube Screamer. Live, I always use it before the Tube Screamer. And I think Tom uses it after the Tube Screamer. It makes a difference in the sound, but I don't really remember what we did on the album. Probably we had it after the Tube Screamer.
There is a lot of EQ going on. It's basically the same sound as the rhythm guitars, and that doesn't necessarily sound very good for a solo, so there's a lot of harshness, and I had to get rid of that harshness. And what I do very often for solos, I like to push like 1 kilohertz. It's where I usually get a lot of tonality for the solos, and also guitars sometimes sound kind of creamy to me. So this is a move that I do quite often. Especially if I use more or less the same sound that we used for the rhythm guitars for solos, most of the times my approach is that I cut out some of the nasty upper mids and push 1 kilohertz. That's a recipe that I do very often. Not always. You always have to react to the circumstances, but here I did that for sure. So let's listen to the difference of the EQ. First without, and then I'm gonna switch it on. What I really don't like when I sometimes listen to albums and I don't know, I sit in the car and I listen loud to the music and it sounds great, and then the guitar solo comes in and I have to turn down the volume because it starts hurting my ears. I really try to avoid that. That's why I did these moves. So let's listen to it in the context one more time. I think it's necessary to pull some of that nasty ksh up there because else it almost hurts my ears. And the other thing that I did, besides that one EQ, I used the delay. In that case, again, the repeater. And I used the memory guy sound, which I like a lot. So the delay is actually relatively dark. It already has a built-in high and low cut, and sometimes it does something magical. I also like to use it for vocals a lot. Let's go to the second solo section, because there's something relatively interesting happening. Okay, I think probably that acoustic part of the solo is rather not the first thing you would expect in a song like that, because it starts like very Slayer-ish, ends very Slayer-ish, and in between you have that acoustic guitar solo. That was probably more like a happy accident in the studio, and we went with it. Sometimes you just need to experiment and go with the flow. So I think at some point I just had an acoustic guitar in my hand and was messing around with it, and then Tom and also my friend Michael, who was the assistant engineer during that production, they were sitting both behind me on the sofa and kind of producing me for the solo, and they thought like, hey man, this is a great idea, so let's go with it. So I just put on some random effects. Well, first of all, a lot of compression that keeps the very dynamic playing in check. So I used, just because I wanted to be creative and not to think too much about compression, I just used that Renaissance X compressor, which is very easy to use. You basically have a threshold parameter and a
output gain, and that's it. So then there is a pitch shifter on it. It's basically adding an octave in a subtle way. Then the next plugin is a Cubase internal plugin, which is called Metalizer. I don't know if I ever used it before or after. I just tried it out, and it sounded good. Sometimes, yeah, I didn't plan that. Sometimes you just need to go with the flow, and sometimes you just do something and you realize, oh man, this is cool. So let's keep it and not overthink. Can't even really describe what it does, but we liked it. And then still a lot of delay. Yeah, I love my delays when it comes to lead guitars. Oh yeah, and there's some sort of EQ. Well, obviously I pushed a little bit of the presence. And I pushed the approximately 1 kilohertz again, because in the context of the music, it always helps me with lead guitars to get the tonality a bit clearer. I will just put that on the fly. The lead guitar just gets a little bit more clarity with this one EQ move. So yeah, that's it for the acoustic guitar, and then the solo has a very similar EQing approach like the first one. I just went way more extreme here because I just think it was necessary. Let's listen to the solo without the crazy EQ. How I approached it is, I'm maybe gonna do that very quickly on the fly. First things is I would just like scan for the most nasty frequencies. This one, we'll cut it out. Then another one, I think like 5.5 kilohertz or something, is like really peaking out. Let's play the whole solo on loop. And then there's also still a lot of fizz up there, which I also lowered. And then the 1 kilohertz move. So that would be like how I would approach that as a first starting point, and then move back into the context and see what it does. Yeah, I had more drastic decisions already when I mixed it, but it's a very similar approach to what I just did. It's basically I'm cutting out the stuff that is harsh and annoying up there and push like the sweet mids. Oh, there's one more thing. Actually, I'm using a little bit of reverb on the lead guitars. I always like to have a large bright room and a large bright hall just somewhere there, and whenever I need it, I would send it to one of these tracks. And in the end, with the solos, we decided to push the solos a little bit into that large bright room. One more thing about the solos that might be interesting, because they sound like they're really quite on the edge and like almost falling into feedback. I think the main important ingredients for that is the wah-wah that we are using. It's a Ibanez Weeping Demon. You don't have to switch it on. You just, in the moment you activate it, it's on, and then you release your foot and that goes off. So that's fantastic for live. It's that thing here, you just, and then it goes back. And it has a very, very aggressive sound. And most of the times, and we also use that live, most of the time, when I play a solo, I use it as a booster and push it all the way down. And that's it. And I was actually, when I recorded these solos, I was sitting right here where I'm sitting now. So I did not sit in front of the cabinet. Probably had the PA pretty loud and that radical pedal, and that made the lead guitars almost on edge to like falling into the feedback. And now that I'm thinking about feedbacks, there is this one part in the rhythm guitars that comes here. If you really pay attention to that, like it almost falls into like some sort of feedback at the end of the sustains. I'm pretty sure that we recorded those guitar takes standing right in front of the cranked up cabinet. And because sometimes we want to provoke those on the edge feedback so that it almost goes into feedback. And then whenever we want to do that, then we just go to the recording room and stand right in front of the cabinet and do it like that.
This is an interesting take. So this is great for people that are going to get a real life experience of like what probably most people do have to work with, a less than perfect environment. As you said, not NRG drum recording, but rehearsal room recordings.
Yeah.
Are these live amps with microphones, or a combination of that with virtual, or how are the guitars done?
It's just exactly the setup that we are using live. So it's Marshall JCM 800s over Marshall cabinets and Tube Screamer, very classic setup. Even though we did one odd thing also, because live we just play a Marshall full stack. We did use two cabinets, but one of them was a Marshall 4x12 and the other one was some weird 4x10 inch bass cabinet. I don't even remember which model it was, but we combined a bass cabinet and a guitar cabinet. That's how we got our sound. Even though, as you might see in the mixing course, in the end when I did that mix again now for the mixing course, I decided to only use the mic for the guitar cabinet and let go of the bass one.
Oh, so you had a bass cabinet and a guitar cabinet and you were blending those on the original mix?
Exactly.
Now, so my question would be, did you not use the bass cabinet because A, it was unnecessary for the extra low end, or B, because you could get the low end you needed from just the one mic?
I could get the low end from the one mic easily, and there was plenty anyways. If I remember correctly, whenever I added the bass cabinet, there was some cool aspects about it, but it also added some really nasty 2.5 kilohertz peak, and I thought like, nope.
That's something you usually pull out, not something you want to add more of.
Exactly. That's why I didn't use the bass cab on the mixing course.
And I suppose the next question, obvious question, is: are you happier with the mix that you've done now compared with the original? Do you think it's a step up? And if so, is that because of tools? I mean, do you think that there's better tools available now?
There's better tools available now, but I think I'm just at least I hope that I'm better, that I have more experience, that I learned a lot since then. And I mean, the album sounds kind of cool, but when I looked at what I was doing, there were a few things where I thought like, well, actually, I don't want to show that to the world or like do that in a mixing course, because I would really say it's wrong. Like I was fixing things with EQs and then I fixed them again with another EQ and then I fixed it in the mix bus and then I did some more fixing and I just thought like, you know what? Let's just bypass everything. Let's do it from scratch. And surprisingly, I maybe needed a third of the EQs that I needed in the original mix. And I think it sounds much better.
I mean, that is a metaphor for everybody's process as a mixer. Yeah, I remember the first time in the 90s, I got on an SSL. It was like... boost cut, boost cut, boost cut, boost cut. I need an extra. Could I put a GML EQ in there? I need a graphic on it as well. And I ended up buying an SSL, and I would literally be just maybe doing some detail work, maybe a little bit inside the DAW, but coming through the console was like, let's just make it brighter and high pass it. Great, next.
Yeah. But that's also a little bit like I'm working nowadays. It's basically I do certain bigger moves, and if there's something surgical that needs to be done, of course I do it, obviously, but I try to get away with like way little or with a way smaller amount of moves and just do what's really necessary. I'm also not one of the guys that searches for like little resonances in the overheads and pulls out this frequency and this one and that one, because I think like, well, if there's something that bothers me, I of course I pull it out, but if there's nothing that bothers me, why take it out and have just a totally flat graph? Now you're kind of killing the character also then, I think.
What DAW are you working in?
I'm working in Cubase.
How very German of you. No, Cubase, I know in Europe is incredibly popular. I know so many producers and engineers and mixers are working Cubase. It's a great DAW. Do you do any hybrid stuff? Are you ever breaking out of the box to use hardware, or are you mixing entirely in the box?
I'm honestly mixing entirely in the box.
Has that been a process? Did you start console, then hybrid, then slightly hybrid to mixing in the box, or?
I started in the box, and I back in the day when I was young, I went to the SAE college and I finished it in 2003, and we were already the first course back then that didn't work with analog tape anymore. So at that time, of course, we were still like working in the school. We had this wonderful Neve console, and in the other room an SSL desk. But when I was working at home, I had a computer, and that's how I started. So basically, I already grew up completely working in the box, and maybe that's good for me because now I don't miss the good old analog times. Even though I'm of course somehow tempted to try out some at least like Mixbus processing tools, but I basically am so used to working in the box that it doesn't bother me. I have some, I have a distressor, for example, for tracking vocals, because for vocals I feel confident enough that I compress them on the way in. And in the other studio where I'm always recording drums, there is a new SSL AVS, and it's of course wonderful and feels fantastic to sit behind that desk. And if you do your quick rough mix for the monitoring, it's also really nice to how it feels and how it sounds if you just push the 8K high shelf on a snare or something like that.
Did you keep a lot of the original integrity of the drums, or did you find that you were using a decent amount of samples to enhance? What's your sort of process on that?
On the original album mix, there were no samples at all. It was all the complete natural recordings that we did, except in the 2 or 3 fast songs, I added a little bit of a sample to the kick drum. Just to help it a little bit with for dynamical reasons. Yeah, exactly, for the brrrp stuff. In the mix that I did now, I did use a little bit of sample to enhance the snare. Did the same with the kick, but nevertheless, I still tried to keep the original sound and the original character. I did not replace the kick and the snare or the toms. I just added a little bit of sample just to enhance the drums. Playing wise and sound wise and regarding the dynamics, I was really, really happy actually with the performance of our drummer Norman, because he was a really hard hitter and really great player. And he's that kind of drummer that has a very good feeling about his own sound and a good awareness of his own sound. So he's basically mixing himself while he's playing. If there's a softer part, he would hit that certain cymbal a bit softer if it needs a bit more. So with him, I didn't have to do much automation at all. Also with the new mix, I kept the sound as natural as possible. Natural is always.
Natural is a moving target, isn't it? One person's natural is another person's processed. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Dumb questions. What mic do you end up miking your cabs with?
On that record, it was a SM57,
right,
and an Audio-Technica 4033A, because that's
nice.
what I had.
Are you tracking all of the guitars through JCM 800s, or are you, for lead parts, for some kind of like overdubs, doing other kinds of using other amps for different tonalities to help them cut through?
For certain things, we did use different things. Like the main rhythm guitars, they were all done through the JCM 800 and also most of the lead guitars. But at that time, I think I was using my X-Effects 2 a lot for like special sounds, for like, there's some clean or like eerie sounds going on that needed like a lot of space on them. And at that point in my life, I loved using the XFX 2 a lot. So I think I used that also a little bit on that album.
That makes sense. Yeah. We've used, it's interesting though, because for me, I've done the sort of reverse. I used the XFX for some of the heavy rhythms because they're like a wall of sound, just like a and then gone for like smaller amps and weirder ideas for the overdubs and stuff to kind of get weird kind of nasally guitars or things to cut through.
At that time, I was also using the XFX every now and then for like heavy rhythm guitars because I could really get this wall of sound. But the thing is with Triptychon, I basically had to use the JCM 800 because it's our signature sound. We always play it live and we try to like really just sound like the band sounds. So I think somehow I wouldn't even been allowed to use the XFX for the rhythm guitars.
That makes sense though, because that is an identifiable part of your sound.
Yeah.
So what are you working on at the moment? What other stuff you got going on?
Well, the next mix I'm going to do is for an Australian tech death band called Freedom of Fear, and I did their last 2 albums and I really like them. They're very, very good players, so I'm excited about that mix again. And like very recently, like a couple of days ago, a crazy album that I worked on from a band called Panzerballett, the German, with like lots of good drummers was released. They have like a different drummer on almost every song. So that was kind of tasked to make it coherent because every drummer, of course, has like his own unique sound and it still had to sound like a coherent record, but still perceive the personality of the drummers. There was, for example, Virgil Donati was playing drums on 2 songs, Marco Minnemann, among other great drummers. So that's something that was just released. And I even had the honor to do some recordings on the new Behemoth album that is coming out these days. So if you are like into extreme metal, then you I've probably heard about Behemoth.
So tell us a little bit about the room you're in. This is your studio in your house?
This is the studio in my house. Yeah, that's the mixing room where I do most of my work. I also have a recording room, which is relatively small, but I do vocal recordings. I do all my guitar trackings in that studio. For drums, I go into a different room because I want big room acoustics nowadays. So I go to a space that is run by a friend of mine. It's called the Church of Sound, or Q7 Studios. But here, I mean, you can see a little bit. Maybe there I got my wall of guitar amps. I still like to, and I got a bunch of more. So yeah, it's kind of like, well, I'm a guitarist, obviously. So yeah, of course, there's a certain focus on guitar recordings, but I just still love to...
I don't see a JCM 800 there. Where's the JCM 800?
JCM 800 is just outside of the door, but with that setup, I have that little switcher here where I can just like this thing here, where I can basically just switch between 4 amps, and it's like goes as simple as switching between presets. It's just like, okay, how does the angle sound for that? Like, on the PV, just one knob, and I can just jump between amps and cabinets, which I really love. But JCM didn't make it into the top 4 list for the album that I'm just doing. So that's why it's in the next room.
What mic pre's do you use for tracking?
So this is my choice. My favorite mic pre actually is my TubeTech MP2A, which I really, really love. Then I still have an Aurora Audio GTQ2, which is like, let's say Neve style 1073 preamp. It's not a clone. Do you know that pre?
Yeah, I know Aurora Audio. Yeah, that's Jeff Tanner's company.
Exactly. And so he's not. He didn't rip it off. He made his own take on that on the 1073. But it's a very, very nice mic pre. And then I also have a Daking mic pre 4. Actually, in total I got 12 channels of Dakings. But the other 8
nice.
I have them in the other room for drum tracking because, yeah, they are kind of famous for, or like very, very good for recording drums. So I got a lot of them.
I would say one of my favorite vocal sessions I ever did was with the Daking as well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, got really great results. I could be wrong, but I believe people can tell me I'm wrong. But I believe Jeff Daking styled those after Trident A range.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, and for drums, I think they're also like relatively close to API. Not exactly the same, but they have a same character. I once made an A/B test between the two of them, and in the end, I went with the Dakings. Also, honestly, because at that time they were cheaper.
Victor, thank you ever so much for giving us a little bit of info there. Is that a lava lamp that's over there?
Of course it is. I think it's a very important piece of gear for a studio. I think I already appreciated your lava lamp. I think a studio without lava lamp is not a proper studio.
Marvelous. Well, thanks ever so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks. Of course, there will be a link to check out the course down below. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I hope we get to see each other in Germany sooner rather than later.
I also have to say it's a big honor and a pleasure having talked to you. I sometimes see you on my Instagram feed, and it's like, okay, now that guy's talking back.
Hopefully, I didn't disappoint.
No, not at all. Not at all.
All right, Victor, you rock. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Check out the course down below. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios. Goodbye, ciao, tschüss.
Goodbye.